The chamber of the Galactic Council hovered like a crown above a blue dwarf star, its inner ring alive with shifting light and the quiet hum of ancient authority. Species from hundreds of worlds occupied their assigned tiers, each seat carved to remind its occupant of rank, history, and submission. Here, wars were ended without battles, civilizations redirected with a sentence, and mistakes buried beneath protocol. Humanity was today's agenda item, listed without ceremony, filed under irregular threats. High Executor Valrath rose from the obsidian dais, his elongated form unfolding with deliberate slowness. His voice carried without amplification, smooth and confident, practiced over centuries. "The human presence has exceeded acceptable deviation," he said. "They do not obey pressure models. They do not fracture under isolation. They adapt." A ripple of discomfort moved through the chamber. Data projections ignited above the floor, showing trade maps, population curves, and military estimates. Humanity's markers glowed brighter than expected, expanding at the edges of council-controlled space. "They were granted limited access," Valrath continued. "They were observed. They were contained. Yet they persist." His gaze shifted, settling on the holographic profile of a single man. "John Morrison." Several delegates murmured. The human liaison's name had circulated often, usually attached to words like unyielding, polite, and dangerous. Valrath gestured, enlarging the image. Morrison stood straight, hands clasped behind his back, expression neutral to the point of insult. "He refuses intimidation," Valrath said. "He refuses concession. He refuses fear." A counselor from the Heliox Collective leaned forward. "Humans are short-lived. Their influence will fade. They inspire others," Valrath replied. "That is the flaw in your assumption." Silence followed. Records surfaced of minor systems questioning council tariffs after human negotiations, of fleets delaying compliance, of languages adopting human terms for defiance. Not rebellion, not yet, but momentum. "The problem is not humanity," Valrath said. "It is the symbol they have placed among us." The emergency authority vote was called without public record. Ancient glyphs flared as decisions locked into the council's core. No speeches followed, no celebration. The order was procedural, final, and lethal. Termination authorized. Far from the chamber, John Morrison walked through the docking concourse with the measured pace of a man who had long since learned not to rush toward outcomes. The station's artificial gravity hummed beneath his boots. Council security flanked him, close enough to appear courteous, distant enough to imply trust. "Your transit is prepared," one of them said, voice carefully neutral. Morrison nodded. "I appreciate the efficiency." The vessel waiting beyond the viewport was sleek and unmarked, designed for dignitaries who required privacy more than comfort. As he boarded, Morrison felt the familiar pressure behind his eyes, the subtle awareness that came when probabilities aligned too neatly. He did not slow. Inside, the cabin lights adjusted to human preference without being asked. A courtesy or a test. Morrison set his case beside the seat and remained standing for a moment, listening to the quiet systems cycling around him. He thought of Earth's oceans, of cities rebuilt after fire, of lessons written in blood and restraint. A soft chime signaled departure clearance. Morrison took his seat and activated a private channel, masked beneath layers of benign traffic. His words were calm, unhurried. "Status." A voice answered immediately, steady and familiar. "All parameters within tolerance." "Confirm redundancy." "Confirmed." Morrison allowed himself a thin exhale. "Then proceed." The channel closed. Outside, the station receded, its vast structure shrinking against the brilliance of the star. The vessel aligned for jump, engines whining with restrained power. Back in the council chamber, Valrath observed the confirmation feed with satisfaction. "The variable has been addressed," he announced. "Human influence will retract." A few delegates shifted uneasily. "And if it does not?" one asked. Valrath's mandibles curved in something resembling amusement. "Then we will address the next variable." A delegate from the Threxian hegemony broke the procedural flow. We have terminated envoys before, she said carefully. None carried this level of preparation. Valreth turned one eye toward her. Preparation is irrelevant without permission to act. Humans act without permission, another counselor countered. That is their defining trait. The executor's tone cooled. Which is precisely why restraint must be removed. He let the chamber absorb that. They believe diplomacy shields them. Today, they learn it does not. Final confirmations pulsed through the Council's systems. Safeguards disengaged. Accountability loops closed. The decision became history before dissent could form. On the vessel, inertial dampeners settled as the jump stabilized. Morrison opened his case and removed a small, unmarked device, no larger than his palm. He turned it once, then returned it to its place, untouched. It was not needed yet. Planning was about patience, not impulse. A faint vibration passed through the hull, almost imperceptible. Morrison smiled, just slightly, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. He had seen this moment in simulations, in projections that assumed betrayal because history demanded it. Hope was optional. Preparation was not. Begin, he whispered to no one. Light collapsed into darkness as the vessel vanished fully into transit. On distant human worlds, systems continued as normal. Civilians went about their lives unaware that a line had been crossed on their behalf. In the Galactic Council chamber, the star flared softly, bathing the assembled powers in blue. Valreth resumed his seat, satisfied that order had been preserved. Around him, ancient empires rested on the belief that control, once asserted, remained absolute. They did not notice the first anomaly register and vanish within their own logs. The verdict had been delivered. Silently. The transit vessel moved through folded space with deceptive calm, its systems humming at levels designed to soothe organic passengers. John Morrison did not let the illusion settle. He sat upright, hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes half-lidded as if in rest, though every sense remained alert. The Council preferred their targets relaxed. It made the ending cleaner. He studied the cabin without turning his head. No visible weapons. No irregular gravity shifts. No obvious breach in environmental controls. The danger, when it came, would be precise. That knowledge did not raise his pulse. It steadied it. Morrison had learned long ago that fear wasted time. His thoughts drifted, not to the council chamber or the executor who had spoken his name like a diagnosis, but to a much older memory. Earth, decades earlier. A night sky lit by orbital debris after a failed negotiation turned into an ambush. He had stood on a command deck then, younger, angrier, watching casualty counts climb while diplomats argued semantics over open channels. That had been the moment humanity stopped assuming good faith was universal. A soft indicator pulsed near the armrest. Morrison tapped it once, opening a narrowband channel that bypassed council relays entirely. The voice that answered belonged to Commander Elise Hahn, steady as ever. "You're early," she said. "They didn't delay," Morrison replied. "That's information." "Understood. All layers green. Civilian traffic rerouted without announcement." "Good," he said. "Any anomalies?" "A few council monitoring spikes. Nothing aggressive yet." Morrison allowed a faint smile. "They never strike early. They wait until they're sure." Hahn hesitated. "John, if this goes the way we expect." "It will," he said gently. "They've always been consistent." Silence stretched, filled only by the distant vibration of engines manipulating reality itself. Hahn broke it. "Protocol Prometheus remains dormant unless confirmed." "I know," Morrison replied. "I helped write it." He closed the channel before she could respond. Sentiment had its place. This was not it. The vessel's internal clock adjusted to compensate for relativistic drift. Morrison ignored it. Time mattered less than sequence. Every action, every response, had been rehearsed across decades of human strategic doctrine. The Council believed humans planned emotionally, impulsively. They had mistaken adaptability for chaos. Morrison shifted, recalling the first Council delegation to Earth. They had arrived cloaked in ceremony, draped in superiority, offering protection in exchange for compliance. Humanity had listened. Humanity had declined. The Council never forgave refusals. A faint click echoed through the cabin. Morrison's gaze flicked to the ceiling seam. Microscopic apertures irised open, then closed again. Atmospheric sampling. Harmless by itself. Combined with other measures, lethal. He catalogued it without reaction. Still subtle, he murmured. He wondered, briefly, which Council analyst had signed off on the method. Someone who believed humans required spectacle to feel loss. Someone who did not understand that humans mourned quietly, then adjusted. The lights dimmed by a fraction, simulating a rest cycle. Morrison leaned back, eyes closing fully this time. His breathing slowed, measured, almost meditative. He thought of the officers he had buried, of colonies rebuilt after blockades, of how many times humanity had been told to wait its turn. Waiting was no longer an option. Another memory surfaced uninvited. A debate within Earth's Defense Council years earlier, when Protocol Prometheus had been proposed. Critics called it excessive. Provocative. Morrison had listened, then spoken only once. They will test us, he had said then. Not because we threaten them, but because we don't fear them. When that test comes, hesitation will cost lives. The protocol had passed by a narrow margin. Back in the present, the vessel shuddered lightly as it approached a scheduled calibration point. Morrison opened his eyes. The air carried a new scent, faint but wrong. Metallic. Sterile. He exhaled slowly through his nose. So it begins, he whispered. A voice cut through the cabin, calm and synthetic. Ambassador Morrison, please remain seated. He smiled again, this time without warmth. Of course, he said aloud. The channel indicator flashed once more. Morrison did not answer it. Some confirmations were better left automated. Instead, he pressed his thumb against a recessed panel beneath the armrest, hidden in plain sight. The gesture was casual, indistinguishable from adjusting posture. Deep within human-controlled space, systems that had slept for years acknowledged a signal they were never meant to receive lightly. Across dozens of installations, status lights shifted from passive blue to attentive amber. Morrison felt the pressure behind his sternum as nanomedical monitors synced with external contingencies. His vitals streamed outward, encrypted and mirrored, copied across redundant networks. If the Council wanted proof, they would get it. Proof was a language they respected. The cabin temperature dipped. Not enough to alarm, just enough to weaken resistance. Morrison's fingers tingled. His vision sharpened, edges glowing faintly as his body compensated. Still too gentle, he thought. The synthetic voice returned. Minor systems irregularity detected. Please remain calm. I am, Morrison replied. The lights flickered once, then stabilized. Morrison's heartbeat remained steady. He focused on it, letting the rhythm anchor him. Whatever method they used would need to appear irreversible. Anything less would invite questions. A sharp hiss escaped from the vents. Pain bloomed in his chest, sudden and intense, like fire threaded with ice. Morrison gasped once, more in reflex than panic. His muscles locked, then released as his body struggled to process the intrusion. He tasted copper. His vision dimmed around the edges. In the last clear seconds, Morrison thought not of death, but of timing. Of the precise moment when loss would transform into leverage. He forced his breathing to slow, allowing the toxins to spread evenly. An uneven response might complicate the narrative. Vitals dropping, the synthetic voice noted, almost curious. Yes, Morrison whispered. They should. Darkness closed in, heavy and complete. Far away, Commander Hahn watched a monitor as John Morrison's heart rate plummeted. Zeroed. Flat. For a fraction of a second, her hands tightened on the console. Then the secondary feed activated. Deep within Morrison's chest, beneath layers of bone and engineered tissue, a dormant system awakened. Silent. Efficient. unimpressed by Council ingenuity. On the screen, a single indicator shifted from standby to active. Han exhaled slowly. Confirmed, she said to the empty room. They chose. The galaxy continued to turn, unaware that a line drawn centuries earlier had just been erased, not by rage, not by conquest, but by preparation. John Morrison did not die screaming. He died exactly as planned. The Council received the confirmation without ceremony. A narrow data stream slid across the central dais, translating human biological metrics into Council standard symbols. The final indicator burned steady. Terminated. High Executive Valreth did not smile, but satisfaction settled through the chamber like warm air. The threat had been addressed cleanly, without spectacle, exactly as doctrine demanded. Verification? Asked a delegate from the Ilith Compact. Valreth inclined his head. Triple locked. Independent monitors. Human medical thresholds exceeded. There will be no recovery. A low murmur followed, equal parts relief and unease. John Morrison's image was removed from the display, replaced by trade forecasts and revised probability trees. Humanity's projected influence contracted neatly, lines folding inward as if obedient at last. Release the statement, Valreth ordered. Moments later, a carefully worded communique rippled through diplomatic channels. Regret. Tragedy. Transit malfunction. The Council expressed condolences to Earth and reaffirmed its commitment to peaceful cooperation. It was flawless, polished by centuries of practice. Across the chamber, lesser councillors accepted the narrative with varying degrees of comfort. Some felt a quiet wrongness they could not name. Others dismissed it as residual tension. The Council had endured far greater disruptions than one human envoy. Valreth rose again. This matter is concluded. Monitor human response. We expect fragmentation within 2 cycles. On Earth and its colonies, the announcement arrived without fanfare. News feeds reported the loss in neutral tones. Flags did not lower. Markets did not panic. There were no public demonstrations, no threats, no sudden mobilizations. Human leadership issued a single acknowledgement, brief and formal, requesting time to grieve. That restraint unsettled more than outrage would have. In a Council surveillance hub orbiting the capital world, analysts leaned closer to their consoles. They're quiet, one said. Too quiet. Silence is shock, another replied. Give them time. Hours passed. Then days. Human traffic patterns shifted subtly. Cargo vessels altered routes, citing maintenance. Civilian liners delayed departures for technical reviews. None of it violated agreements. None of it offered leverage. Are we seeing fleet movements? An analyst asked. Minimal, came the answer. Routine patrols only. The data was correct, and that made it worse. Within a secured human installation far beyond Council sensors, Commander Han stood before a wall of light. John Morrison's vitals scrolled across multiple feeds. One showed nothing but a flat line, preserved and immutable. Another, buried beneath encryption and misdirection, pulsed with quiet activity. He's stable, a medic said. Stasis holding. Cellular reconstruction progressing. Han nodded. Time frame? Hours until conscious. Longer until mobile. That's fine, she said. He doesn't need to move yet. Elsewhere, systems long dormant accepted new parameters. Communication buoys adjusted encryption standards. Defense grids shifted authority from advisory to autonomous oversight. No alarms sounded. No alerts were issued. Everything occurred within tolerances approved years earlier, ignored by observers who believed paperwork equaled irrelevance. Back at the Council, the first anomaly appeared and vanished within routine diagnostics. A minor delay in enforcement fleet synchronization. A fractional error, corrected automatically. Valreth did not notice. The second anomaly persisted longer. A patrol group reported difficulty accessing a trade corridor, its clearance codes rejected by infrastructure that should have obeyed instantly. The report was flagged, then downgraded. Human-built systems, an aide explained. Likely latency? Valreth dismissed it. They are grieving. By the third day, several Council-aligned worlds reported disruptions in resource accounting. Nothing critical. Nothing urgent. But the pattern began to form, subtle as erosion. A junior counselor finally spoke. Executor, with respect, these irregularities correlate with human networks. Valretha's gaze sharpened. Correlation is not causation. Agreed, the counselor said carefully. But they are synchronized. That earned silence. In the surveillance hub, alarms chimed softly as new data streamed in. Human fleets were moving after all, emerging from deep space positions so dark they had been mistaken for background radiation. They did not form attack vectors. They did not charge weapons. They simply appeared, occupying lanes the Council had assumed uncontested. Why aren't they broadcasting intent? An analyst asked. Han watched the same feeds from far away. Because they don't need to, she said quietly. Within Morrison's stasis chamber, lights adjusted as his brain activity increased. Memories surfaced in ordered sequence. Pain controlled. Darkness temporary. He would wake soon, to a galaxy already shifting. The Council convened an unscheduled session as reports accumulated. Valreth listened as advisors spoke faster, voices tight. They haven't violated a single clause, one said. But enforcement is becoming difficult. Then apply pressure, Valreth snapped. We are, another replied. It's not working. For the first time in centuries, the Council faced resistance that did not announce itself, did not posture, did not demand. It simply proceeded. Somewhere between reports and denials, Valreth felt the first trace of doubt. It was faint, unwelcome, quickly suppressed. The human was dead. The symbol erased. Yet the galaxy felt different, as if something had already moved past the point of no return. The Council had executed a man. They had not stopped what he set in motion. John Morrison woke to quiet, not darkness. Light filtered through his closed eyelids and calibrated gradients, gentle enough to avoid shock. His lungs filled smoothly, assisted, then released him to breathe on his own. Pain existed, catalogued and contained, stripped of urgency. He opened his eyes. The chamber was familiar. White, unmarked, human in its efficiency. No banners. No symbols. Only function. Morrison flexed his fingers once, then again, testing response. Everything answered. Welcome back, Commander Han said from the far side of the room. How long? He asked. 17 hours since confirmation of death, she replied. 6 since revival threshold. He nodded. Council response? Han hesitated, then allowed herself a small, tight smile. Confusion. Frustration. Internal disputes. They're requesting clarification from systems that no longer answer exclusively to them. Morrison swung his legs over the edge of the platform and stood. The floor adjusted automatically. Any civilian impact? None, she said. As designed. Good. He took a slow step forward, grounding himself. Then they've learned the first lesson. Elsewhere, the Galactic Council chamber vibrated with restrained disorder. Data flooded the air in overlapping layers, reports stacking faster than they could be dismissed. Enforcement fleets stalled at checkpoints that had never existed. Trade corridors rerouted themselves without explanation. Subjugated worlds transmitted questions instead of petitions. High Executive Valreth stood rigid at the center, eyes tracking a projection that refused to resolve into compliance. This is interference, he said sharply. Trace the command origin. An aide swallowed. We have. It's distributed. Human architecture. Autonomous but lawful. Then sever it. We can't, another voice said. They built redundancies into shared infrastructure. Cutting them would isolate half our own systems. Silence followed, heavy and brittle. A counselor spoke, voice low. We removed the Anva. This was not the expected outcome. No, Valreth replied, slower now. It was not. The lights dimmed without warning. Not power loss. Priority override. A single channel forced itself open across every display, every interface, every listening device within Council space. John Morrison appeared, standing alone against a neutral background. No insignia. No weapons. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. "Members of the Galactic Council," he said calmly. "You believed you acted decisively." Shock rippled through the chamber. "That is impossible," someone whispered. Morrison continued unhurried. "You authorized my death under emergency authority. You concealed it beneath protocol. You assumed humanity would respond emotionally, visibly, and poorly." Valreth found his voice. "You should be dead." "I was," Morrison replied. "By your standards." The words landed with quiet force. "You mistook access for control," Morrison said. "We integrated with your systems because cooperation reduced harm. We documented your dependencies because preparation prevents it. When you chose assassination, you triggered safeguards designed to preserve balance without bloodshed." A counselor rose. "You are threatening." "No," Morrison interrupted, still calm. "I am explaining." He gestured slightly. Data replaced his image, streams of information flowing freely, enforcement abuses, economic coercion, classified votes stripped of secrecy. Records once buried beneath Council authority now broadcast unfiltered to every member world. "You ruled through opacity," Morrison said. "We respond with clarity." Valretha's mandibles tightened. "You destabilize centuries of order." "You call it order," Morrison replied. "Others call it submission." On dozens of worlds, representatives watched histories they had never been allowed to see. Patterns emerged. Lies unraveled. Questions ignited. "You could have negotiated," Valreth said. "You could have appealed." "We did," Morrison answered. "Repeatedly. You dismissed us because we refused fear." The executor straightened. "What do you want?" Morrison held his gaze through the lens. "Boundaries." The chamber stilled. "You will relinquish unilateral enforcement authority," Morrison said. "Independent oversight will be established. Species autonomy will be respected. No covert executions. No silent erasures." "And if we refuse?" Valreth asked. Morrison's expression did not change. "Then nothing changes. That is the consequence." A murmur rose, not of defiance, but realization. The Council's strength had always depended on compliance. Humanity had not attacked it. Humanity had made it optional. "You think this is mercy," Valreth said bitterly. "It is," Morrison replied. "Because we could have done more." The transmission ended as cleanly as it began. In the aftermath, the Council fractured along fault lines long ignored. Some members demanded reform. Others clung to authority already slipping through their grasp. Worlds once silent began speaking, emboldened by the absence of immediate retaliation. In a quiet room far from the chamber, Morrison sat with Han, reviewing cascading updates. None required immediate action. "They're requesting negotiation," Han said. "Directly. No intermediaries." Morrison leaned back, considering. "Let them wait." She studied him. "You planned for this?" "Yes," he said. "But planning doesn't make it easy." Outside, human fleets held position, unarmed, unthreatening, undeniable. The galaxy adjusted. The Council had sought to erase a man. Instead, they had revealed what happened when humanity decided survival was not enough.